Hi, Debbie. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. So, Debbie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
So my name is Debbie. I am a landscape architect and the current director and founder of Orterra. Previous to me running this business, I used to lecture and tutor at QUT in landscape architecture. I have worked in the public sector. I have worked in the private sector. And I've also worked over in London for quite a few years, both in the public and private sector over there too. So I've got quite a lot of experience doing a huge variety of different projects in all across the world.
Fantastic. And bring a lot of that into, obviously, you're born in Queensland as well, and you run Orterra in Queensland as well. So you're very much.
No, not born in Queensland or
Oh, wow. Yeah, don't get that wrong. Yeah, where do you come from originally?
New Zealand.
Oh, how did I not even hear that accent?
Yeah.
What is
No.
that? Oh, rightio.
I've been in Australia since I was 3, so I'm pretty Australian.
Okay. All right. Well, I do love New Zealanders. That must make a lot of sense. That I think they're some of my favourite people I always connect with. Anyway, so tell us a little bit about what you do at Orterra and who you help and what you do.
Look, we help a really wide range of different people. We have a few sectors we focus on. We focus on commercial work, a lot of subdivisions and design and construct projects. We focus on a lot of education work, particularly for primary and high schools. We do a lot of infrastructure work with local councils and engineers, and we do a small portion of residential work in people's homes and gardens, which is fun.
And so what we're going to talk today a little bit about is play, green infrastructure and landscape as well, and how important that is. So why don't we talk about play to start with? So tell us a little bit about why landscape is so important in education environments.
Well, we could probably just talk the whole podcast about this. But look, play is one of these things which is, for some reason, forgotten as soon as we turn into adults. And it is incredibly important for children in terms of learning how to be good adults in the world. And there are so many different aspects to play that need to happen. It helps with our emotional regulation. It helps with our physical sort of gross motor skills. It helps with fine motor skills. It helps with learning. It helps with our relationships as we get older and sort of negotiating those sort of things you learn on the playground. And I think we just forget that as adults, and our education system is not set up and our lives are not set up to really allow children to play freely, how they want to play for long periods of time. They might get 15, 20 minutes here or there between going to activities. You know, they get a little bit of play at school, but a lot of these spaces, particularly in a lot of schools, they're not engaging for all different types of play.
Yeah.
So they are very narrow in how students are allowed to play, and that's not necessarily how they want to express themselves. Play is a form of expression for children.
And I was going to say, I mean, in this day and age, the thing is that, like, I've got a playground right outside, a trampoline, and all these areas that my kids can go and play. But, you know, they always ask, oh, can I have screen time? And I'm like, well, we don't do that during the week, right? But it is one of those things that these days it's so easy to just put a child in front of a screen, or it's not necessarily natural for a person to be sitting. We spend about 90% of our lives indoors, but we're actually not. Our bodies aren't made for that. They're not made for sitting all day. They're not made for being inside. They're made for being outside and actually doing it. And so I can understand, you know, just merely from a neurological point of view, that actually movement is so important to our brains functioning at their best and being able to make those connections. And as you've said as well, the difficult thing is that you've got to invite and create spaces that are inclusive for everybody as well. So we had a bit of this pre-conversation before. So, you know, you've got 2 kids yourself, and they've got very different personalities and very different ways that they play. Is that right?
They do. And I like to say I have sort of both ends of the world in terms of play. I have one child who is incredibly active, loves getting out there, doing sport, running around, and then I have another child who does not. And it's not to say she doesn't love getting outside. That is one of her favorite things to do. But she doesn't want to run and play ball games. She would much rather be creating worlds in, using nature, or she would much rather be going on a walk somewhere or sitting reading a book under a tree or experiencing the outside environment in a different way to being really active. Much, much more kind of imaginative in terms of how she plays. So it's not all kids are the same. And the thing with play, particularly in a lot of our play spaces and a lot of our schools, is that there isn't choice for those kids who don't want to play the ball sports. There's not a huge amount of choice for creating worlds for themselves. So a lot of that's very much restricted, or there's not the facilities or the items in the space to be able to hint at something else that they could do.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, that is the important part, and remembering of nature is a really big part too. So you see so many playgrounds are just a lot of softball, right? And, I think that's starting to change the way that people start to think about actually how we're creating environments that are stretching the imagination or pushing the physical elements of children and what they can do, but it's also in a safe way, because I know there's lots of regulations around those. Is that something what type of things do you try to advocate and to really make sure include it in, doesn't have to be particular parts, but the design and the philosophy and the approach of what you look like when you're designing?
Look, when we designed for inclusivity and looking at how we can do that to the best of our ability, whatever space we've got, for me, it's really about creating that choice. Because a lot of kids, for example, if you've got a child who has some kind of sensory issue, some playgrounds can be incredibly overwhelming. If you're sensitive to noise, like some spaces are just, it's like an echo chamber.
Yeah.
So creating spaces where they don't have to be they can be included in the play, but they don't have to be in the center of the play.
Yeah.
Or even just, giving kids choice to go and do a multitude of different things rather than be all in the one space just allows for someone to go, you know what, I don't want to do that today, so I'm going to go and do something else. And there is something else to do. It's not just, I can only slide down the slide, or I've got this small sand pit to play in. Like, you've got a sand pit and you've got, 100 kids playing in a sand pit that's built for 10. Like, that doesn't work.
Yeah. And I think the thing is that there are, I've got kids who are a bit like that, who you get overwhelmed with too many people at one time. And it's having the ability to go off and do your own thing, or to go into smaller groups and have that. I mean, nobody ever, you think about it, even as adults, it's not like we enter in a room and like you work into a network and there's a circle of 40 people. There's not. There's always a smaller, 5 to 6, 8 people sort of max. Everybody is sort of, and it's quite funny watching kids. I've only got 4 and a 5-year-old, so I sort of watch them go through stages, but they're all better when they're in smaller groups and they can go off and they can do their own thing.
And look, it comes down to this choice. It comes down to choice. You then have a choice, and it's a lot of the time those spaces, like those quieter spaces or those creative spaces, or they're just as important as the swings and the slides and the climbing frames and the balancing beams and all of those things. They're actually just as important, because they serve a different part of us, and they serve a different section of, our mind and how we think and how we feel. It's like there's a reason that there's a theory called attention deficit disorder that people can get, where you just don't connect with nature. And that's not necessarily, it's just about being out in nature and experiencing it in a different way. It's a different type of way we experience things. So allowing kids and people to have that choice to choose what is suitable for them at a particular time.
Yeah.
Really important. And
Absolutely. And I mean, I suspect going through that process at the moment, having a child who is neurodiverse, I'm neurodiverse myself, and we're all different individuals as well, is that it's also sometimes there's going to be wanting to have a loud and a go and it needing to get energy out. And other times there's just a recharging and needing to sort of be able to come back from something or something's happened, and having those options to be able to do that. As you said, sensory is obviously a very large part, and it's something that we need to consider in what we are designing in playgrounds and spaces in general, not just for children.
And sometimes people just have a bad day. I have like you just have a bad day, or you might have woken up a bit grumpy in the morning, or you might have, you might be just like, sometimes you just need to kind of connect with the earth and things again. And, that's not always.
I'm a massive one, obviously, for that. I mean, I literally moved from Melbourne because I picked up very early on that my son was going to he needed outdoors environment. And we wanted our children to grow up. We made a choice to live where we live because we wanted our kids to be literally, I just walk to the beach. I don't walk to the beach. I have to ride to the beach. But I literally can go to the beach, and that's how I, go in, or I can go into the rainforest, which is only like a 10-minute drive. And then you're in nature and you're doing all of that. And I think I'm somebody who knew that about myself, and I also suspected that in my children as well, that it's going to be quite important. And I think that's the amazing thing that landscape, does provide, because it isn't just in the personal realm. It isn't just in the school realm. It is, as you said, in the infrastructure realm. It's in the public realm as well. So how do you also go about in creating inclusive spaces, particularly when you are working for councils or working for engineers and on big infrastructure projects, actually optimizing and also keeping in mind, obviously, generally there's a lot for the upfront bill, but there's not necessarily as much left over for the maintenance side of things.
Yeah, look, it's a really fine balance. It's not always easy, and sometimes you have to make choices, and sometimes choices are made for you in these types of projects. But I always kind of, and I tell my staff this, come down to what is the best outcome for the user? Like, who is going to be using this space? Who is going to be using this area? And what is the best outcome for them? And it's not just thinking about your typical person, it's all of the atypical people. It's all of the people, because realistically, and this is inclusive in, like, a lot of people, when they think of inclusivity, they think of, oh, that's a person who's disabled and they're most likely to be in a wheelchair or maybe blind. That's kind of when that's the picture that kind of comes out. But when you actually think about our society, if you have a look at all the different types of disabilities which there are many, and they are diverse, and some of them are physical and some of them are not. And then you have a look at all of the people who might have a temporary disability. So they might have broken their leg, they might be pregnant, they might be sick. And then you look at all the people who are children, and then you look at all the elderly. If you actually take that proportion of society, majority of us in some way have a disability, according to the perfect person that we are meant to be designing for. So we design for those people because that's the majority of us.
Yeah.
So if we can make it comfortable for a female to be there by themselves, we've succeeded. If we can make it comfortable for an elderly person or a child, or, as easy for them to move about the space, we have succeeded. If we can try, we can't always accommodate everybody, but if we can accommodate as many as possible, then
it's the principles of inclusive design, right? Which I'm sure you heard, the old bell curve and then the ends here. And if you design for the people who might be at the ends, but as you said, majority of the time there is a larger majority than people think. Then you are actually making more inclusive by thinking about, okay, what would that be versus, okay, it just looks pretty on a piece of paper and that's great, right? And I'm sure it must be sometimes just simple little things and choices that you're actually making within the design as well and the approach.
Yeah, sometimes it can be. Sometimes it can be very simple choices that can make a big difference. One of the things when I first had my son, I started using a pram, as most parents do, because you can't carry them everywhere. It made me look at car park design completely differently. And, you know, even how that space is functions and used and access and getting around, and curbs and footpaths, that's completely different. Like I had a completely different experience. Much more appreciation for people in wheelchairs or crutches, or, you know, trying to get about. I'm like, I've had slight blinkers on for.
I know, and you don't realise it
You don't
until you're
realise.
actually,
No.
yeah.
So it's about, I think, as a designer, I've learned, if I try and take myself out of it and try and step into as many different types of people as I can when I'm designing a space and how they might experience the space. Even like sometimes when we're designing places or play spaces, we look at, I try and get us to actually imagine ourselves as those people. You know, what if we were 5 years old? You know, you sit on the ground and go, okay, well, if we've got this and this is big, is that enough? You know, and that goes to even to people who are maintaining it. You know, what if, you know, we were on a lawnmower and we're the grounds maintenance man, and we're doing this afterwards? Like, what is that experience going to be like for us? Because that's what we're designing for.
I think it's so important. I mean, my partner worked in facility management, right? And I work with a lot of architects, and we'd often be like, okay, that looks great, but to maintain that is going to be an absolute nightmare. And I think it's the same, obviously, in landscape. It's, you know, the maintenance is just as important. The selection of plants or planting, and what you're going to approach in that, and how that's going to grow and mature, and what the water is going to be required. I mean, for somebody who does not have a green thumb, I appreciate these things, but I would have no idea what to select. And obviously that's, you know, I think that's the amazing thing about landscape. It is design, it is about user experience, it is about understanding the whole as well. You know, even if you're working from that, if you are going into a school and being able to have more of a master plan approach within designing it out. But then it is just as much, you know, it is about understanding the placement of certain plants, where that's going to work. You tell me. I mean, this is your area of expertise.
Look, plants are absolutely one part of it. I find it really funny sometimes when pretty much everyone wants a low maintenance garden. There aren't too many. I don't have too many clients that are like, I really love, you know, gardening, getting out there, like, give me something high maintenance. I want to be out there every day. Like, it's not often that happens. But a lot of people think low maintenance is no maintenance. And so, but that even, I'm like, that doesn't happen. Like, I can't, like, it's not possible. If you design a building, it's not possible to design anything or anything in our world that you don't have to in some way maintain. Yeah. There are ways to make it easier, definitely ways to make it way harder. But a lot of people seem to forget that, and they think, oh, it's a concrete path that's done now, I don't have to worry about it. But actually you might need to. Or it might be plants. So different plants can grow at different rates. You can put some plants in that are going to be pruned all the time. Some make it harder, some make it easier. Or it could be play equipment. That's another big one. Everyone's like, oh, I don't want to have to maintain play equipment. I'm like, you do have to. You have to look at this every year. You can't just not look at it every year. Yeah. Put in metal play equipment and you don't have to worry about it anymore. Like, that's a thing you have to check. So everything requires maintenance. I think one of the things, and I always struggle with this, is there's never enough kind of budget at the end to achieve sometimes what the client really wants to achieve long term. Like, if you look at our spaces and our public spaces, particularly, if you've got somewhere like Southbank, is a great example of this. The maintenance that goes into Southbank, like the use of it, for example, there's thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people using that a year. But the maintenance that goes into that and the cost of that is very high. Like, it's not a small amount of money.
Yeah, right.
It's those highly used landscapes. And I have this discussion with schools particularly, because they're highly used landscapes for very short periods of time. So they require different amounts of maintenance than, maybe an oval or a turf. But that's not always a consideration necessarily sometimes afterwards.
Yeah.
And thinks regret this great thing, and then it's kind of like, what are we going to do after it?
Well,
So
it's quite funny. I think a lot of the big private schools have their own landscaping teams.
they do. But public schools don't. Most public schools have one groundsman / building maintenance person, and that's it.
Yeah, I know. And it's not like the grounds have changed in any
No.
way. It's just literally, which restricts a lot of it. I mean, I understand it from well, I suppose it depends on what your approach is, right? Like obviously for schools, it's like education and doing that. And that's what you're really advocating on the other side of how important landscape actually is. So whether it's in a school environment or whether it's an infrastructure environment or commercial environment, how much impact does the landscape really make to a project and to the whole feeling that somebody has or the experience they have?
It can make and break a project realistically, or it can make and break a space. It's everywhere you go has a feeling and a character and a space. So, for example, we went to Europe over Christmas time, and we went to when we were in Scotland, and we went to a fish ladder in Scotland, and it wasn't time the salmon were jumping, but we're like, oh, go and see what this is like, because it's not something we really have in Australia. And we were walking into this area, and my daughter goes, are we meant to be here? And I said, what do you mean? She's like, this does not feel like a place we're meant to be. This feels very industrial. This feels like a place that we shouldn't be. And I'm like, she was right. That was the character that they'd kind of given to this walkway. It's very, very formal, very industrial, kind of felt like you're somewhere you weren't meant to be. That's a feeling that comes from walking through a place. And that happens anywhere, whether you're in the city, whether you're at home, whether you're at a fish ladder in Scotland. Like these places give you different feelings. And how we design them and how we manipulate them will change and either improve or hopefully not make that worse. That's generally not the idea. But sometimes you design places that you're like, we don't really want you to go there.
Yeah.
There's actually a technique we use for design. We're like, well, we don't really want you to go there. We would prefer you to go this way. This is a much more appealing direction to go in.
Well, particularly with schools and infrastructure too, you must be doing that quite a bit. It's like, okay,
absolutely.
This is the area. This is not the area.
This is not the area we want you to go, but we do want you to go over here. This is the safe way to do it. This is the safe way to go.
Yeah.
This is the direction we want you to be walking in. Roads projects are a lot about that. This is the safe way. This is the way we want to go. Making that wayfinding in that direction really clear. So, it's nice, comfortable, safe place to walk.
Yeah, and those people have those experiences.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all very interesting. Thank you for sharing some of those insights and stuff like that. What have, I suppose, been some of your projects that you've been most proud of and that you feel like you've made the most amount of change to?
Some of the projects I've been most proud of. I think that changes like over the years of my career. I've worked on some really beautiful projects that have made some amazing changes to communities and how they use space. And that was really amazing to see that kind of transformation in the community and the community using it. I think probably the ones I'm most proud of are the ones where I actually get to go back and see people using the space well and see it working. Sometimes I go back and it's not working as well as I thought it was. And I sort of really take a lesson from that.
Absolutely.
But the ones where I've gone and I'm like, this is actually making an impact on the person, or there was one project I was working on. It was a revegetation project of a creek line. And the whole aim was to revegetate this creek area so that we'd get fish back in it. And we spent a lot of time on this project and a lot of energy on it. And I went there and the contractor was like, we saw fish. And I'm like, no. Like, I did not think this would happen. But it happened. I'm like, absolutely proud of that project because it achieved
Amazing.
exactly what the outcome was meant to be. It was all about the fish. And that was the user, which is the interesting thing about that project.
My
So
son, who is a he loves fishing, it would be very, very happy.
it's great. It was great. And I was so happy. I was so happy. And it's great. It's turned into a lovely space now. But yeah, it's really they're the ones that I really love where you can actually see people using them.
Well, and I think that's where you're quite lucky within the spaces that you work with and what you work on, particularly in the education space, because people are using those. They don't really have a choice, kids are
No,
going to
sometimes they're
school.
stuck. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Like they're
Kids are
going
stuck
to
there.
go
They can't
there
walk
for
half
that
the day.
time. And the same as you were saying in, the public realm type spaces and infrastructure projects, it can either look something that people go, okay, great, there's a train or there's an area that's being done, but I'm not really going to use it because it doesn't feel good. It's not somewhere I want to be. I'm not going to be there after dark because the lighting's not set up right, or this isn't, or if I've got children, I can't really take myself to that space because I can't see them all the time, or I can't see what's going on, and all those experiences as you spoke about. I think that's what I love about working with designers is that you get to help people and design for actually differences that you are making to people's lives. But if you're working for a developer or if you're working for the end user, actually being able to go, well, this asset is actually worth more now, is actually going to have a bigger impact on these people using it. I think that's the thing. Private schools spend a lot on their infrastructure and their building maintenance and their landscapes because they also know it's actually a massive attraction. I remember when I chose my university, like I decided to go to one university because the design of the campus was just more inclusive and that versus another one which had been designed in the 70s. And I was like, the ugly one was the better university. Went to the other one because I was like,
makes a difference.
I was like, you go to universities, you're 18, you kind of like, I went to a lovely school with lovely grant, and I was like, just not getting the vibe from
Look,
this. This isn't where I want to be.
I think if COVID has taught us anything, is that people realize that outdoor spaces are a lot more important to us than we thought they were. There's a lot of people that couldn't go anywhere.
You're talking to Melburnians, so Queenslanders shouldn't even speak when we talk about not going anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, Queensland, we were really lucky. But there's a lot of people who couldn't go anywhere. And so people realized, and I noticed a huge change during that time. People realized, my street is actually really important and my garden is important and my outside area is important and my local park is important. I think along the way over the years, we've sort of forgotten that a little bit again. I'm always advocating for getting more into our spaces, but
I think being Melburnian coming up to Queensland, the thing is that you spend most of your time outdoors, right? So, and landscape can either be something in the middle of summer, the searing heat, you can be like, I can only go there from 8 till 9. Or it's something that you can access because you're going to be able to find some shade. There's suitable areas. It's something that's going to work, right? And we all, spoken about, we have kids. They hit a certain point in time where you're just like, I got to get you out. You just got to run. You just go, right? And I think that's it. Like, I'm fairly lucky where I am. Not only we've got natural environments, but we're also in a council, the Gold Coast City Council is actually spends an enormous amount on its infrastructure and what it does, and we're quite fortunate with the amount of playgrounds that we have within a very short distance to us. But it is something that I think it's what makes people want to live somewhere too, right? Absolutely. Like if you have that infrastructure, so I've got a playground, I've got this and that. That's why people want to be around that space because it's not just what's in their backyard, but it's also what's within their walking distance. And I even think about in 2 places we could have, got a house. We're very fortunate in the place we did because, like, I literally walk out my back door and I'm around a lake with the dogs, right? Whereas I notice other people have to walk their dogs through an industrial area and do that. And it's like, it's just a very different experience. And I always believe The experiences that you experience on a daily basis is actually, that's majority of your life,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And so,
Absolutely.
you know, that does actually matter what that experience is like going up to the train station and not. You know, we're talking to somebody about, you know, designing with transport in mind and thinking about that. It
Mm.
does actually matter what we're looking at when we're looking at public realms. And it does make a big difference because as a female and as somebody who's part of the LGBTQA blah, 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 I know that's a big thing as well. Like, you need to feel like you're in a safe space. Nothing's going to happen to you. And that perception of safety can very much be designed by the landscape around, or what is actually, you know, how we're thinking about those. And I think in Queensland in particular, we are outside and it's bloody hot. And if you do not design with good green spaces and landscape in mind, it can make it quite
It's
inhabitable.
absolutely. And, you know, a lot of councils over here are pushing for particularly more street trees
Oh god, yeah.
to help with that. We've got a huge problem in Australia, particularly with the urban heat island effect, and our cities are getting hotter.
Could you
They're
explain that for me, for those of us who don't know what you're talking
resilient.
about?
So, urban heat island effect is basically we have created cities with so many hard surfaces of roofs and buildings and paving that we're heating up our cities.
Yeah,
So, for
right.
example, there have been studies on some of the western suburbs in Sydney's where they say they're going to be inhabitable in the future just because it's too hot. So, we
Yeah.
are building environments where we might not be able to live in the future. So, um, creating uh, more green infrastructure through trees and using our creeks and whatever else we can to create better environments that are not so
Mm.
hot. It's incredibly important.
Mm.
And it's funny. A lot of people say to me, "Oh, it's just a few trees," and I'm always saying, "But how long did that take for that tree to get to that size and that state?" It's not a quick process.
No.
Any tree I plant now is going to benefit people in 10 to 15 to 20 years time and
Yeah.
onwards.
Yeah.
It's not it's not helping anyone now. It's
And it's
that's
only gonna get hotter, as you
it's
said, even if it's in this, and we know with climate change, it's only gonna get
yeah,
hotter.
it's
And
only
I
going
think it's, you know, it's quite fascinating because obviously having traveled the world, if you go to lots of countries where it is quite hot, so whether it's in the Middle East or the upper
to
part of Africa or even down in Spain and, you know, parts that are getting a bit hotter there, a lot of the design is around a courtyard or is around the shade and is around water and evaporation and is actually, that is the integral part of the design.
yeah.
And it's interesting. I mean, we rented a house here that was like west facing, nothing. And I was just like, who is even allowing this? But the same thing, like even simple things that I find, which is not landscape, this is more the
Yeah.
urban side, but I don't understand why they've given so many planning permits. Like, we don't have it here either. I've got no footpaths. I'm like, how does this even, like, who was even letting this happen? This just makes no sense. We have this beautiful part we can go, but to get there with my
You have
pram,
to go on the road.
I have to walk on the road. And I was
Yeah.
like, and there is no trees because obviously they haven't planned all that. Then obviously coming from Melbourne,
Mm,
it's kind of sound like I'm banging on about it, but that is, I mean, Brisbane is one of the greenest cities in the world. I think
mm,
it's about 90% greenery under some stats I looked at when I came up here. But in Melbourne, you do feel it because it is like, it's a lot more structured. We have proper streets, proper infrastructure is actually put into
yeah,
those, and it makes a massive difference.
it does. And look, that comment that you made about the footpath, that goes back to accessibility. What we were talking about right at the beginning, right? How do you make a place accessible for all? Because not everybody can walk on grass and
Mm.
edges and all the other bits and pieces. They need a footpath.
Just
If you've got young kids and you've got a really busy road, you're not going to take them for a bike ride on the road to get to the local park. That's just not going to happen. So that actually, you've actually summed that up very nicely. It's actually, that's about, it's about
Well, and it has a fundamental effect. Like my kids haven't learned to ride a bike. I'm a mountain biker, and I was like, yeah. But it fundamentally changed because we couldn't lift the bikes up and go and take them and do all that. Now, I don't know what an excuse is in the last few months, but it does make a big effect and change to you. And I think that's the thing that people like. It just amazes me how certain things aren't considered. I'm not quite sure how councils let it go anymore. Surely they can't be.
Look, there is a whole heap of things that go into designing like subdivisions and council areas, and there's so many aspects. There's so many sort of consultants that come together to create these places, and there's never just one thing you could blame, I don't think, in terms of why don't we have more of this? Why don't we have more of that? I think from my point of view, and the way I deal with it is I advocate for what I think should be in there. So the footpaths and the street trees and the connections and all the other bits and pieces. And that's my job. That's what I'm meant to do. I'm meant to advocate for that stuff. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. But that's okay. At least I tried. So
I suppose I just always assumed it's a requirement. It's one of the things when you come out with there's very large LGAs versus in Victoria we've just got like Melbourne itself is like I think it's like 40 different LGAs. So like you go to a new suburb and it's something different. So whereas here it's like no Gold Coast. I mean, what's the next one? Redlands, I think, and then Brisbane, and then Moreton Bay, and it's like the LGAs are just massive. But I just kind of go, I don't understand how the planning isn't in how these things are requirements for planning. But that's a whole other subject in itself.
Yes.
In essence, I think particularly when you're traveling to rural areas as well, and I mean, you think about that a lot of the time when you're going for a road trip or you're doing something, you're going camping. Right. I think actually Queensland does do this pretty well, I must say. I feel, and their facilities are generally pretty good. But I used to drive from Melbourne to Queensland about once or twice a year for family was up here. And I know which pathway I go for a particular way because I know I can stop and there's playgrounds all the way. So I take New England if anybody wants to ever know that. It's a bloody brilliant way of going. And especially when you got young kids, you can stop, or dogs, you can stop, you can get out at any point in time, and it's stunning. But it's also one of those things, I think, for rural councils, if you want people to come to your cities as well or your towns, actually that does have a big
that has a huge and rural councils know that. They know that. And a lot of them really try and create great facilities for people who are traveling. There's a lot of their money sometimes goes into that.
And also the local communities too.
Oh, absolutely. And it's I think when you start looking at rural areas and how designing for rural areas, it's completely different to designing in the city. And one of those things is just distance. It's a lot. When I'm designing something from the city, I approach it in a completely different way to when we're designing in rural areas. And that's because whatever goes to that space has to be shipped there. Yeah. So if you're designing something that's 4, 5, 6 hours away, we are most of the time we're carting pretty much everything there.
Yeah.
So, and then they don't have the skills supply that we have in the cities. So you might not have all the skills necessarily in that particularly if it's a small town, you don't necessarily have the skills you need in the small town. So you really need to think about how you design these things and what you're designing. Yeah. I mean, and then again, comes back to the maintenance afterwards.
Absolutely.
And making sure that whatever's there is actually suitable for the skills and the facilities and the, what they've got in the area. If they have to wait, multiple weeks for repair, something that's broken to be repaired because they live 8 hours out from a city area where we can access here in a couple of days, that's a completely different thing.
Oh, yeah. And the costs are a massive one. And that, I think I really like your approach within actually thinking about the full life cycle, actually thinking about, well, how are we going to build it? How are we also going to maintain it? And I think that's what good design is. You know, some people do beautiful designs. They look great on a piece of paper. You know, they look fantastic with a bit of Photoshop on the top. Excellent, great. But they don't take into consideration, okay, how are we actually going to build it? What's that going to cost, whether it's, as you said, an urban environment or in a regional environment? And then what does that actually continue to look like from maintenance? Because that's realistically what a client is thinking about, right? Because they've got a budget.
Yeah,
At the
absolutely.
end of the day.
And I think the thing that often gets forgotten is that landscapes change. So it's funny. I sometimes have conversations with clients where they're like, "Oh, like it will just stay like this, right?" I'm like, well, yes and no. It'll stay like that for a point, but you know that plant eventually has a life cycle.
Yeah.
Or that tree has a life cycle, or even a park bench or a playground. Like it has a life cycle. It's not going to be the same forever. That's why I love plants, because you can never really tell what's going to happen with them, and sometimes they surprise you. I was literally at a client's place yesterday. We've did a beautiful rooftop garden. It looks amazing. And we were talking, and she's like, "This plant is going nuts." And I said, "Yes, it is." She's like, "Is it meant to do this?" And I said, "Well, look, it's really happy here." and she's like, "But over there, it's not." And she's right. In another bed, it was not very. It was fine, but it was like the gross difference was astounding. And I said,
and that can even be soil half of the time. I got friends who are like, "This plant isn't growing, but these ones 3 over are." Like,
yeah, exactly. And I'm like, she's like, "What?" I said, "Well, it's just really happy. You've made it really happy in this environment, and it's loving it." I said, "I'd just be happy that it's happy rather than not growing at all." And you know, and it's the interesting thing about dealing with things that are alive.
Well, we did talk about that previously. You know, like what I do is I only have so much control over it. But
exactly.
you know, plants, you might have a little bit more control than I have over people.
Yeah, sometimes yes, sometimes no. And there are definitely things that you like. There are definitely wrong ways to do it, and there are definitely right ways to do it. And generally, if you do it the right way, you have a great outcome.
Well, there you go. Then it is quite similar to people.
Yeah, but and sometimes it doesn't work too. But that's okay. That's part of dealing with living things. I think people forget plants are living things that do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, they grow and they change and they move, and they're meant to. Like they're meant to have change with the seasons, and they're meant to. It's the kind of the beauty of the world.
And look, my mother is a massive gardener. She planted like 1,000 roses in their house. Like we used to grow up on a farm. You know, she'd have just a mad garden. And you talked about that, about people who want to know maintenance gardens. That's me. Yep. But my mother is the person who's literally put in stuff where I'm like,
why?
Because she loves it. She will go in. She loves gardening. And we live in a house where the people used to love gardening. And so I'm like, we need to update our garden because they were retired, and so that's what you do, and it is actually really good for you. So I suppose the other thing is that as much as we talk about that and we talk about being in the environment, they've actually found that I was talking to somebody the other day. They told me that there's connections between. Apparently, there's a larger growth now in people who are going the young dementia.
Yes,
in their 30s and 40s. Yes. And they've actually found that things like learning how to cook and actually going into your garden and gardening are actually having a massive neurological effect on these things. That should encourage me to do more weeding on the weekend. But I find it fascinating from that. You're obviously nodding in a way that you've heard this before.
Absolutely. And do you know, sort of full circling back to children. So one of the best ways, and it actually works for adults as well, one of the best ways for emotional self-regulation is digging.
Right.
The digging is actually one of the best things that anyone can do if like you're having a stressful day, a hard day, like, or you want to work, like if you go and you actually dig, that is actually one of the best things you can do for you. Which is why Like if you,
I'm thinking about my son and what I can do with him sometimes. I'm also thinking about myself that
look, it is. There's something about it that I think connects us. There's the physical aspect of it that you're kind of expressing, but there's also the connection then that you're getting with the earth and the outdoors and the soil. It's one of the reasons they're like things like dirt digging pits and mud pits and sand pits is so important for play spaces.
Right. Okay. I'm thinking now I need to go and put something. We do a lot of this, obviously, more at the beach, but I'm now thinking, oh, okay.
Beach works just as well, but so if anyone's having a
The
bad
last time I had to dig a hole, though, yeah, it sounds good. Sounds good. All right. Well, that makes a lot of sense. My mother absolutely loves her garden. She spends about an hour and a half in her garden every day.
It gives people a lot of joy. It's one of the things that it gives people a lot of joy.
I look forward to being retired one day, and that's my
and having the hour and a half to do it. See, that's the thing, right? This is the life stage thing. I was talking to a client the other day, and they're getting elderly, and they brought me in because very similar thing. They used to absolutely love their garden and what they did, and she was telling me all of the things she used to grow and all the things she used to do, and she's just like, I cannot do it anymore.
Yeah,
I cannot do it anymore. I still want to be in this space, but I can't access it anymore. I can't do the gardening anymore. I need to change it so I can still come out and experience that space.
Yeah, enjoy it, but do it
in a different way now. So yeah, it's important that, and I suppose then that comes back down to the accessibility thing we talked about earlier.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing. I mean, as well, if you're we know in Queensland there needs to be more of high density built up, obviously, to meet the housing needs. And it's obviously been quite low density. And so now we're not just looking at land developments, we're obviously looking at more apartments and townhouse developments, and how important having great landscapes around, because you may not have the garden that other people might have because there just isn't the sheer space.
No, and it's also really important then to have really good infrastructure and facilities around those as well. Yeah. Great path networks, great parks, great spaces they can go where you can utilize sort of that public realm becomes way more important in high density areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. All right. Well, we could probably keep talking for hours on this, Debbie. Thank you so much. Now, we always do finish on at the end. Is there any books, podcasts, people that you recommend? It can be something to do with this or something to do.
Something to do with something else. Look, I had to think about this. I think everyone should read. There's a book called The Invisible Woman. And I'm going to butcher her last name.
Caroline. Right. We'll put it in the show notes.
Perez. And it's gives you a real different perspective on our world and everything from urban design to medicine and everything in between. It's a really, really fascinating read, or audiobook as I did it.
That'll be me too.
Yeah, that's probably my recommendation.
Yeah, great. Excellent. I feel like whenever I do these podcasts, my books become, I'm like, yep, okay, now I've got another 50 books to listen to. That's brilliant. All right, Debbie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
All righty.